What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel I'm going to bring you two Fender Jim Root Signature Series guitars. I got the Made in America Stratocaster and I have the Made in Mexico V4 Jazzmaster. Both these guitars are my personal guitars, so what I want to do is give you my honest thoughts and opinions of living with these guitars and putting them through various situations, things I noticed with these particular guitars, and give you my honest thoughts and opinions of what guitar is going to be right for you if you're considering one of these two models from the Jim Root Fender Signature line. With all that being said, let's hop into today's video. Now, to give you all a little bit of context with Jim Root and Fender guitars and his signature line, that whole relationship started around 2008, I believe, with his Made in Mexico Telecaster, and that guitar is still in production to this day. The next guitar that would follow would be the USA Stratocaster, which came in a couple different variations, and the next guitar that would come after the Stratocaster would be the Made in America Jazzmaster, which is kind of a hybrid between both of the aesthetic choices of the guitars you're seeing on screen right now. And last but not least, the actual Fender Jazzmaster V4 that you're seeing on screen right now. That guitar was released in around 2020, and I remember being at the NAMM show in 2020 and seeing that guitar actually get released and being super excited because it was a really cool addition to the Jim Root signature line because it had a lot of new features and a lot of new aesthetic choices that were not present on a lot of those earlier Jim Root guitars. Now, something that is very notable throughout the entire Fender Jim Root signature line is that they are a blend of vintage and modern appointments. We have traditional Fender shapes here. We got the Stratocaster and we have the Jazzmaster and obviously the Telecaster that we're not going to be showcasing in today's video. We do have then a lot of modern appointments that really bring these up a few notches to then help Jim do his job in Slipknot as best as he can, given these are purpose-built for his time in Slipknot and for the average rock and metal player. And that vintage modern aesthetic and those build choices are really popular amongst guitarists nowadays, and I think a lot of that is attributed to Jim Root and especially a lot of those other players who have played Fender guitars and modded them to actually get them up to snuff for the rock and the metal genres. And something else that should be mentioned about the signature guitars from the Fender Jim Root line is that these guitars have been seen in so many bands across the world, whether they are at the local club scene or they're at the professional touring level, as these guitars are so well built, they're great workhorses, and clearly it's a testament to these guitars as there's so many artists worldwide who use these guitars because they are just this fantastic. And before I get to my own personal thoughts and opinions on these particular guitars, I will say that these are some of my favorite signature guitars because they are just great workhorses, they're very reliable, and they're kind of readily available. So essentially, if you are like a Fender touring artist, or if you are someone who is considering one of these guitars, you can kind of go to any music store around the world and grab these guitars. And Jim Root has actually done that a few times with his various guitars through his Fender signature line, and just to prove a point that these guitars are ready to go right off the shelf. And I don't know what else could be said, but I think that's a huge testament to the build quality and just the overall design choices on these guitars. All right, now let's do a deep dive on the specs, the features, the similarities, and the differences between the USA Fender Jim Root Stratocaster and the Made in Mexico V4 Jazzmaster. All right, so now let's start with the oldest guitar out of the two. Now this is my Made in America Fender Jim Root Stratocaster. It's a 2012, it's a very early production Jim Root Stratocaster here. Now, like all of the Fender Jim Root signature guitars, they all have a mahogany body and they all have a maple neck that comes with the iconic skunk stripe. And you do have the upper access heel because all of these guitars are bolt-on guitars, and because Jim Root is a metal guitarist and he also does play some solos in Slipknot as well, that upper access heel helps you get up higher onto the fingerboard just to make lead playing and soloing just a little bit easier, just so you're not fighting against a giant block that is on traditional Fender guitars, since all Fender guitars for the most part are pretty well bolt-on guitars, and that's just the inherent design choice of Fender guitars here. Next up on this guitar here, we do have a traditional Fender Stratocaster output jack here. We do have a nice scratch plate here, and as you can see here, mine is kind of worn. Not sure how well that's going to translate on camera. Something else that's very unique about the Fender signature Jim Root guitars, they all have the proprietary Fender hardtail bridge, and that's just a string through easy adjustable bridge, no tremolo or anything like that. That is just Jim's design choice. I know another one of his signature guitars does have a Floyd Rose, but that is a different brand altogether. One volume and a three-way pickup selector. We don't have the traditional Fender Stratocaster layout since this is a very purpose-built rock and metal machine. We do have two humbuckers here. This guitar comes factory with an EMG 8160 set. My Jim Root Stratocaster in particular has the Seymour Duncan blackouts, and I changed those out years ago when I bought this guitar just because they worked better for my signal chain and for my playing, although there's nothing wrong with those EMG pickups, and I'm actually curious to maybe get a set of those and just throw them in here and just see how they compare to the blackouts or even Jim Root's new signatures pickups from EMG as well. Pretty well all of the Jim Root signature guitars have an ebony fingerboard that has a 12 to 16 inch compound radius, and essentially that means that the fingerboard and the neck up here is a little bit more round just to make chording a little bit easier for you. and the fingerboard and the neck does get a little bit flatter the higher you go up the fingerboard, just to make lead playing and soloing much easier. The neck profile on this guitar is really, really comfy for me. It's kind of like a Goldilocks of necks, if you will. It's not super thin like a traditional Charvel or Jackson, or it's not super thin like an Ibanez, and it's not super thick like an actual Gibson Les Paul or anything, which I know Jim Root does really like. This is a really great in-between neck profile, and I'm sure if you grab one of these guitars, either used or brand new in a music store, and you just play it and hang out with it, and you actually have a few other guitars to compare them with in terms of the neck shape and size, you're gonna feel the same way, as this guitar is really unoffensive and it stays out of your way, and it's just a great all-around guitar to actually live with and work with on a day-to-day basis. Keeping with the very traditional theme of this guitar, we do have 22 nickel frets. These are jumbo frets though. Moving up to probably my favorite part on this guitar, as I've said before, we got the giant 70s Fender headstock. I love this headstock so much. I also really like how this guitar actually comes with locking tuners. Again, locking tuners are a great modern upgrade to really help with string changing and keeping your guitar in tune. Not that this guitar has any tuning issues or anything, or even the other guitar that we're going to learn about in a little bit. Both of these guitars have had great tuning stability from my time of owning and using these guitars in almost a daily context. And I do really like how this guitar just has black hardware. Really cleans up the whole look and everything. And again, another modern choice that is generally not really seen on any other Fender guitars, since a lot of those traditional Fenders all have chrome hardware. And it's really cool to see this guitar being so purpose-built and being so focused in metal, but also has a lot of those original Fender design choices as well, like the vintage headstock and just the overall Stratocaster body with the old scratch plate here. And now, in my opinion, this is kind of like the gold standard and kind of like where it all started in terms of like the vintage modern build, especially since so many other brands are offering vintage modern builds, and it seems like the Jim Root line kind of kickstarted it, and that is in my humble opinion. If there's someone else and another brand that really kickstarted the whole vintage modern vibe, let me know in the comments below. But as far as I know, it seems like these guitars really started it all. All right, now let's move on to the Fender Jim Root V4 Jazzmaster. This guitar has a few similarities to the Stratocaster that we just reviewed, but I'm going to cover those and the other differences in much more detail right now. We got a mahogany body. We have the same proprietary Fender hardtail bridge, the same electronics layout, 2 humbuckers, 1 volume, 3-way pickup selector. We do have the Fender upper access neck joint here, again, just to help you play higher up on the fingerboard. We have an ebony fingerboard here with 22 jumbo nickel frets. We have the maple neck, skunk stripe, Fender locking tuners, black hardware. And the last thing that is similar about these two guitars is that we do have a 12 to 16 inch fretboard radius. And that's kind of where the similarities end for the most part. Now let's get to some of the differences on this guitar compared to the Stratocaster. We have the signature EMG Damonum humbuckers. I was really impressed of how great these pickups sound right out of the factory. And I think I honestly want these pickups in the Jim Root Stratocaster because these pickups just sound that good. I was really blown away with them, and yeah, hats off to Jim and EMG for creating such a great product on here. Another difference that we have on this guitar is that we have actual inlays. We've got the big block inlays. I'm a sucker for big block inlays. I really like how these look on this particular guitar here, and I love how they look on just most guitars in general. It's a really vintage and a classy look, and especially because this is, you know, a metal guitar, it's really cool seeing these vintage appointments like big block inlays that are found on, you know, old school traditional guitars. This guitar also has neck binding, which kind of ties in the neck a little bit nicer than the outgoing Stratocaster that we just reviewed. This guitar also has lumen-lay side dots, and if you don't know what lumen-lay side dots are, is essentially you can hold a light up to these and charge them up, and these are going to glow in the dark if you're playing on a dark stage. This is a fantastic feature to have, and I really wish the USA model had these because this is actually a game changer when you are playing live. The lumen-lay side dots aren't going to be charged up for your entire 1 hour or 1.5 hour set, so do keep that in mind. But if you're playing like a 30-minute set or something like that and the lighting is pretty dim, charge these up and you're going to notice there's going to be a night and day difference of you navigating your fretboard on a dark stage. And now this guitar is obviously a Jazzmaster, and I'm going to show you a picture of a traditional Jazzmaster on screen. Now under that pickguard that is on that traditional Jazzmaster, that is all hollowed out and routed out for the electronics. This guitar is rear routed, so all the electronics are accessed just through the back cavity here. And something I do want to say, because this guitar is not routed out like a traditional Jazzmaster, this guitar sounds absolutely massive plugged into an actual amp and listening to it in the room, or even just like recording with it and going into my interface. This guitar sounds huge, and if you're wanting to actually get one of these guitars, this might be a really great option if you're looking for a great guitar that's going to sound great in the studio because it is so thick and it's made of that really good mahogany wood. Now, some people might like the fact that this guitar sounds really big. Some people might not like the fact that it sounds really big because you might have to do a little bit of extra studio work just to kind of roll off that low end that maybe just kind of gets forgotten about or actually muddies up the signal. Take it for what you will. plug these guitars in, try them, and see what works for you rather than writing something off because you've read it or heard it online. I will say though that this guitar does sound much more larger and kind of like in your face by comparison to the Stratocaster. Again, the Stratocaster has a traditional design. The internals of the guitar are routed out for that traditional Stratocaster body, so maybe that has something to do with how that guitar sounds versus this guitar where there's no extra routing to house the electronics on top of the guitar. A couple last differences between these two guitars. This guitar here, this is the V4 Jazzmaster. This one has a smaller headstock. There's a lot of people online who are actually saying that, oh, it's the same 70s headstock. I'm gonna put both headstocks side by side, and you're gonna see that the actual Fender Stratocaster has a bigger headstock than the V4 Jazzmaster. And I do believe the Made in America Jazzmaster has the same headstock that is found on the Stratocaster, so I'm not too sure why they switched it up for this. Maybe that was just Jim's choice as he was designing this guitar. And one final thing that's very different about this guitar is that the neck on this guitar compared to the Stratocaster is a little bit thicker. So as I said with the Stratocaster, that is kind of like the in-between of the very thin and very thick neck. Now this particular guitar is on the thicker side. It's not like a Les Paul or anything. This guitar still has a pretty comfy neck if I'm being totally honest with you, but just be forewarned, if you are looking at this guitar, try it in person because this guitar's neck actually kind of surprised me. I do really like the neck, as I just said, but if you are used to very thin necks and you only like thin necks and you want this guitar, this might not be the guitar for you as the neck is a little bit thicker by comparison to the other Jim Root guitar that we just talked about. And before we get to some guitar tones, it should be noted that both of the guitars that you're about to hear are strung up with strings from today's sponsor, the String Source. And if you haven't heard of the String Source guitar strings, I've talked about them many times on my channel, but essentially they are packaged as balanced tension string sets. And if you're new to balanced strings, essentially what that means is that every string on the guitar, from the very first string to the last string on your guitar, is going to be pulling the same amount of tension between every string, and every set of strings from the String Source are optimized for certain guitar tunings based on the packs that you buy. If you want to learn more about String Source guitar strings and balanced tension guitar strings, click the link below, and if you want to try a set of those String Source guitar strings, make sure you use my discount code MRTNTSS at the checkout for a bit of a discount on your next order with the String Source. Now at this point in the video, let's hear the Jim Root signature Jazzmaster and the Stratocaster with some isolated guitar tones. Alright, so at the end of the day, if you couldn't pick up on it, like, I really like these guitars. And obviously I like them so much because I have two of the Jim Root signature guitars. Both guitars are great workhorses, as I've said in pretty well both the demos on these individual guitars. Now, it does go without saying that I do have a clear favorite in this. This is going to go to this guitar here. I'm going to quickly touch on maybe why this is my preferred choice out of these two guitars here. Essentially, this guitar here, the USA Stratocaster, I can buy this guitar blindly and it's going to show up great. This guitar has had zero issues in my time of owning it and gigging with it and playing it. Literally no issues. I have maybe had to adjust the neck a couple times just because of the climate changes. Otherwise, the neck has been straight. There's no fret sprouting or anything. The wood is really good on this, and the guitar is just built really solid. As I said earlier, this guitar does sound a little bit thinner than the Jazzmaster. Again, that's not a bad thing to say that this guitar maybe sounds weak or anything like that. This guitar does sound really good, and it doesn't really require a lot of extra work to really sit in the mix. This is a really great sounding and great playing guitar, and it really fits me really well. Now, obviously, it might be a little bit hard for me to recommend this guitar if you maybe have seen my earlier video on this guitar here, because this guitar here, this Fender Made in Mexico Jazzmaster, and a lot of the other Fender Mexican series guitars, they used to be a really great bang for your buck. Now, unfortunately, this guitar and a lot of the other Fender like Made in Mexico guitars have really come from the factory with a good amount of issues. This guitar's big issues were a bunch of fret issues. And honestly, the frets on this guitar, brand new, were on par with maybe those $150 Harley Benton guitars, which is pretty bad. And both these guitars retail for a good chunk of change, and this guitar is the more affordable version between both of these guitars. So keeping that in mind, like, imagine you saving up all of your hard-earned money and then you're gonna make your one like maybe big guitar purchase of the year, or maybe one of two big purchases out of the year, and it's this guitar here, and then you get it and the fret ends are totally destroyed. Or maybe there's a couple tall frets from the factory that have not been ironed out by quality control or anything. And unfortunately, that's been happening to a lot of Fender Made in Mexico guitars, and I've talked to a lot of owners of these Fender Made in Mexico, like either the Jim Root guitars or Made in Mexico Fender guitars in general, and they are having a lot of issues. And I do want to clarify that I have played this version of the guitar, like the V4 Jazzmaster and the Made in Mexico Jim Root Telecaster, across so many different music stores across Canada and the United States, and as well as the Made in Mexico like Charvel Jim Root signature guitar that just got released. And consistently between all of those guitars, the frets have been pretty bad across all of those models. So I don't want people thinking that I've only played this guitar and this is like my one bad experience with Fender or anything like that. Like, I've played this guitar and multiple versions of the Made in Mexico Jim Root line, and I've played a lot of other Made in Mexico guitars, and it just seems like the Made in Mexico Fender line is not what it used to be, which is really unfortunate. Now, then again, once you iron out these issues, and maybe if this is something you can negotiate with the seller of the guitar or something you can negotiate with the music store, then I think this would be a great value guitar. I personally love how this Jazzmaster looks, and I remember going to the NAMM show in 2020 and I was blown away of how cool this guitar looks. You know, we have the lumen inlays, we got the binding, we got the zebra pickups, and clearly Jim's signature pickups and the big block inlays. Like, that checks pretty well all the boxes for me. Like, those are fantastic features to have. This kind of falls under the radar, and especially for the price that these things retail for brand new, I would really want to go for this, but at the end of the day, you do got to play these guitars, as pretty as they are to look at. So if we want to get a guitar that has zero issues from the factory, it's going to be the Made in America version. But if you can find one of these Made in Mexico Jim Root signature guitars or Made in Mexico Fender guitars in general, all of the potential issues are dialed out, the guitar feels great, then maybe go for this one. If the quality control on the Made in Mexico series guitars really are kicked up a few notches, I think these guitars would be the clear winner at the end of the day, because they pack so much value and so much punch for the price that these guitars are retailed at. Otherwise, here is our clear winner today, and this is where you should be spending your money on if you're considering a brand new Jim Root signature guitar from Fender. And that is going to do it for today's video. If you learned something new, and if you have a Jim Root guitar of your own that you love so much, make sure you drop it in the comments below, because I would love to engage with you on all of those particular guitars. If you like this video, make sure you leave a thumbs up. If this is your first time checking out one of my videos, I have tons more videos like this on my channel, so please consider subscribing. And if you really love what I do, make sure you ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.